Hello, everyone. We have been on pause a moment or two to wait for others to join. Um, my name is Mark. I am one of the REDCap administrators for the ITS REDCap, and we want to welcome you all to our March Lunch, Learn, and Collaborate meeting. I hope everybody's had a great week, productive week, and we do appreciate you pausing today to join us to have your lunch and watch some presentation about REDCap. As always in these meetings, I like to start off by sharing some stats about our system. And um, want to mention that currently, in the new REDCap, ITS REDCap system that we have migrated everybody's projects to, we approximately have 386 active projects. About 153 of them are in production, and the balance of 234 are in development with great ideas and strategies. We have approximately 404 active users at this moment, and happy to say that we have added yet another Mosio project for a total of 7. I want to review, if I could, for a moment, a life cycle of a project generically. In this nice graphic we have here, first off, the idea of building a project is born, a protocol is drafted, and then they get a project in REDCap and they start developing. They develop it with your instruments, forms and surveys, and test all the workflows, the branching, the alerts, etc. in that develop mode or development project or build, and with test data. This is very important. I always like to remind everybody the data that you put into the REDCap development should not be real data. Because as it says down here, you got to make sure that you got the approval from the IRB. And so once that project and development is past the mustard and ready to move on to production, you put in the switch to request it to move to production. The REDCap admin team moves it into production after addressing a few things such as your IRB, and other documents that are necessary to move it into production. Once it's in production, clearly you can do the data entry, review data, analyze data. Data can be entered directly into the project or have surveys to bring in the data. And again, it's real data. You do not want to, when you move it from development to production, move the data in there to the production. When the move switch happens, it asks, do you want to retain the test records? 99% of the time, the answer should be no. We've had a few that they got a little bit ahead of themselves and started entering in real data in their test. So we have a way of just allowing the test to come over, but that is strongly not recommended. Also, you'll finalize your protocol and your IRB documents and everything when we move it into production. Your project's going along, you're collecting data, analyzing data, reviewing records, and you're communicating with your participants. And then you realize that you either forgot something back in the development or you had an aha moment and decided to add something new to your project. We switch it back to a draft mode, not to develop mode, but draft mode. And that is where you would also do your protocol amendments and you would do your update of the project settings. We do want to mention that and when you're doing making the modifications in the draft, you don't want to be changing your code list, and this is more of adding new questions or processes. You do not want to modify anything that's already existing because the data that you already have collected could potentially become dangled and lost, and we won't be able to help you recover. That's why I've always said you might want to make a backup of your project and your data not only the data, but also the framework, the metadata, before you move it into draft in case there was an oops. We can easily help you roll back. Once the project has reached its end of its purpose and need as far as collecting data, um, we strongly recommend to move it over analysis and cleanup mode. We have almost all of our projects, both when it was in the REDCap and in the ITS REDCap, they're sitting in the production mode, even though there's no collecting of any new data. So it's better to move it over to analysis and cleanup so no one accidentally enters in additional data that you weren't expecting. You still can review the data. You can still do analysis on the data. You just can't do any data entry. So that's a protective safeguard. And that can go back and forth. If you can move it back, we can move it back if you decide you got an extended grant or something and you want to continue adding data. But once you've got it in that mode, you don't, and you want to basically freeze the project, we move it to a completion mode. The project will be closed, the data analysis is finalized. And so and that's basically the life cycle of a project. And we recommend that if you need helping moving your project from production mode where you're not collecting any new data and move it into analysis and cleanup, send an email to the REDCap at fsu.edu or put a request in through the tech support portal, and we'll gladly help you on a one-on-one meeting. All right. So a couple other reminders. A reminder of support. We at RCC, or Research Computing Center, are responsible for the maintenance and administration of REDCap at FSU. This is that portal I was talking about. You create a ticket if you need any kind of help. And the support that we provide is user creation, one-on-one consulting, i.e. if you needed help moving your project from like production over to analysis and cleanup, or logic in your build or what have you. We provide guidance on building your project and best practices. If you have any project change requests, i.e. moving it to production, or even moving it back to draft, any APIs, etc., we'll gladly help you on that. And we'll reach out to you through emails to let you know about downtimes and upgrade communications. Another reminder about training that we have. We've got a suite now. We're really adding a good collection of tutorials and other documents. Vanderbilt has a great set. This is the URL to their library. Alex on our team will be sharing about half a dozen links that I'll be going through, and Simi might be going through in our presentations today at the end of this presentation. There's also archive of previous slideshows of the LLC. So if you wanted to go back to, I think we started this in January of last year, we should have that collection at that link there of our meetings so you can review, and if there's any particular topic that you wanted to review on. And we have a self-paced training in Canvas. This is the link to that. It's not intermediate or advanced. It's more of just beginner and to intermediate, just to let you know. Also, I'll remind you, we're always reaching out and looking for REDCap colleagues to present with us some great ideas in their projects, some ideas that you put in your project that you believe others could benefit from. You could present some gotchas while you were building your project or collecting your data, or some cool stuff. It doesn't matter. We got this link here. If you would like to join us, it'll be, I'll be still emceeing, I guess you could say, the presentation and then loop you in to present your cool idea or challenging ideas or situations. And then that's it. This is very painless. We love others. The idea is we want to allow REDCap users collaborate with each other instead of staying focused on just their ideas and their projects only. Another reminder is if you would kindly keep yourself on mute until after the presentation when we'll have Q&A and any kind of discussions about REDCap. Our presentation today is by Simi, who is joining us to talk, and she is my colleague in the REDCap administration. She's going to have a presentation about user rights and DAGs. And with that, I will stop sharing. And Simi, you have the floor. Sammy, I can't hear you. Can anybody else? Can everybody else hear her?
No, we can't hear you.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Nope.
Still can't hear you, Sammy.
No,
No.
no, nope.
Did you switch to the bigger headsets?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Yep,
we got
perfect.
you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry about that. Okay, so the objectives that I will be going over are what user rights control, what user roles are, what DAGs do, how to configure each of these things, and some best practices for research projects. All right, user rights control what each user can do. So some examples are editing data, exporting data, designing instruments, or editing other people's user rights. Research teams often include many different roles, and so you don't necessarily need everyone to have every ability. And user rights can help prevent potential issues like accidentally exporting identifiable data, deleting important records, or researchers in one site seeing participants from another site. So here are the user permissions that you can edit within the user rights framework. So project design and setup, this involves creating different data forms and surveys. User rights themselves can be edited, including user roles and DAGs, which we'll talk about in a minute. So you can edit your own user rights and other people's. Survey distribution tools, file repositories, a lot of administrative tasks like setting up alerts or calendar reminders, looking through logs, that kind of thing. And project-specific permissions can also be edited within user rights if you have a randomization module, if you're using the mobile app, if you have an API or an external module, that can be configured using user rights. Some data-specific permissions are data entry and export, and this can be configured per instrument. You can give a read-only permission, view and editing permission. You can allow people to edit survey responses, and for data export, you can allow people to export only de-identified data or full data sets, or just remove all identifier fields. And again, these can be varied per instrument. So the data import tool, the record and record management can also be edited within user rights. That includes the ability to delete records, which is a pretty significant power. Creating reports. The reports you are able to create, however, do depend on which data rights that you have access to. So if you don't have access to view data from a specific survey, you cannot create a report with data from that survey. Stats and charts, same kind of thing, and data quality tools. All right, how user rights are managed. So you can click the user rights option, which is under the applications heading in the left-hand column. Keep in mind that you have to have permission to edit user rights. If you don't have permission, that will not show up in the applications tool. Once you're in there, you can add new users with custom rights. Before you add a user, that user has to have a REDCap account. You cannot add someone who does not have a REDCap account. That won't do anything, and you can request an account on their behalf if you want. Once they're added, you can go back and edit their user rights at any time just by clicking on their usernames. Here's some high-risk permissions that you should just be careful with. These should be administered very selectively, only on a need basis. First of all, is project design and setup. This allows people to not only create different instruments, but also edit them, including editing your logic. Deleting records, that's a pretty important one. Full data export, which allows people to see identifiable data. File repository, if you have important documents in your file repository, you may not want to give everyone access to that. And of course, probably the most important one is editing user rights themselves, because if someone has the ability to edit user rights, they can just change their own user rights and have access to everything. Right, user roles and DAGs. So setting individual user rights can be tedious or lead to error in large projects. So some tools to help you get around that are creating user roles and DAGs. So a user role is basically a reusable template of permissions. Think of it like a job title. And a DAG controls which records a user can see and interact with, and these are used for multi-site studies. So we'll talk about each of these individually. I'll start with user roles. So user roles can be created and managed on the same page that user rights are set at. This is what the page looks like. You can see there's an option to add a new user with custom rights, to add a user to an assigned role, and to create roles. Keep in mind that REDCap does not come with default roles. You have to create roles before you can add anyone into it. User roles can also be set with expiration dates. So you can say this person only has data entry for 1 month and then it expires. And users will be notified when they're added to a new role. Here are some examples of common roles. Again, REDCap does not have default roles. You would have to create these, but these are common templates that people create. So a project administrator would have full access to everything. You want to be careful handing this power. Don't have too many administrators. Maybe just the PI can be an administrator. Data entry, which would have permission to enter and import data and create records, but nothing else. A data manager would probably have full data permissions, including exporting, as well as deleting records. A project coordinator would have the ability to create and edit instruments, to configure user rights for other people, and probably to enter data, but not necessarily export. And a statistician or data analysis would need to be able to export full data with identifiable characteristics, but not enter data or alter any other aspect of the project. These are just some common examples. All right, now let's talk about data access groups. So what DAGs do? Researchers can create one or more data access groups in a project. New records are automatically assigned to a group within that project, and users can only access records within their group. So for example, if you're a user with data export permissions, you can only export data from the DAG you're in. A user can be assigned to multiple groups. So if you have a lot of different groups, you can assign someone to 2 groups or 3 groups or just one group. Any user that is not assigned to any group will have access to all data. So you want to make sure everybody, unless they're like a PI or an administrator, has access, is added to a DAG before you start inputting real data. Some of the benefits of DAGs is that they protect participant privacy, they prevent cross-site editing, they help organize data, and they support collaboration between different institutions. So in order to create a DAG, the option is right next to user rights under that application heading in the right-hand column. Again, you would need permission to configure this. If you don't have user rights permissions, this will not show up. It's a very similar process. You click the DAGs icon, you get the option shown below, and you can create as many groups as needed and assign users to one or more. Here's just an example of how DAGs can be used in like a real life project. So let's say you're doing a collaborative research project between Florida State, UF, and USF, and you are using hospital data from TMH, Shands, and Moffitt. This is obviously very highly secure data. Nobody at this hospital wants it to get out to more people than it needs to. So one way you could protect that data is creating a DAG for each university. So that way TMH data would not be accessible to any users in UF or USF, as long as they're added to the UF or USF DAGs. Conversely, FSU researchers would not be able to view or edit data in other DAGs, even if they had user permissions. So an FSU user that has export permissions would not be able to export data that is in the UF or USF DAG because they don't have access to that DAG. A principal investigator would not be added to a DAG, and therefore they would be able to see data available in all groups. If you had a statistician that was working with all of this data, they might be excluded from a DAG. Or you could have separate statisticians, for example, for each university, and that's how you can use user roles and DAGs combined for extra security. All right, so the conclusion is that setting user permissions properly prevents errors and maintains data security. Once again, user rights are what permissions a user has access to. User roles are a template of user rights that can be used for multiple users, like a job title. And DAGs are data access groups that determine what users can see and access. These tools can be used separately or in combination based on your project's needs. And some best practices. Configure user permissions as soon as a new user is added. It's very easy to forget that. Make sure you also double check the permissions regularly as often as you can. Make sure a user has a REDCap account before adding them to a project. They will not be able to access that unless they already have a REDCap account. Limit high-risk permissions to necessary users. And going along with that is don't add too many administrators who would have full access to all permissions. Create user roles for larger projects instead of setting individual permissions. That can prevent error. And add data access groups for multi-site projects. But make sure if you're going to do this that all users are added to one or more DAGs unless you want them to have access to all the data. And finally, contact your PI or project administrator if you would like your user rights changed. If you don't have access to something and you need that change, make sure you contact your PI before you contact us. Because if you contact us, we're just going to contact your PI anyway. Great. Any questions?
We'll pause here for a moment for people to raise their hand and ask questions. Alex is monitoring the hands and the chat.
Yep.
This is
Go ahead.
Yep. Can you hear me?
We
Yeah.
can, Jacob.
Yeah, this is Jacob Stocks from IDHI in the College of Nursing. I just had a question about the file repository. I think in our experience, when you give folks user access to the file repository, there are, I believe, three default folders that come with that. There's the exports, the if you have like eConsent enabled, those generated PDFs, and I think some third folder that I can't remember. But I don't think there's a way to condition down access to those folders within the file repository. I believe it's only newly created folders that you uh, issue within the file repository that you can limit down access. And I think that's come up for us in the past with multi-site studies where e-consent forms are being generated and populated in the file repository. We can't give access to those PDFs at a site-specific level because of the three kind of default folders. Is that the case, or am I missing something there for specific DAG related access in the file repository?
I believe for the default folders, it is an all or nothing thing. I don't think you can make that site specific. So I think you're right about that.
And is there any way to, when you're setting up the e-consent framework in 2.0, and you check that box to say, like, we want this to go to the file repository, there's no way to condition to a specific alternative folder and not that kind of default folder? Is there any way to kind of work around that? Our personal workaround has been to have that PDF that's from an e-consent be populated somewhere in a CRF for that specific
Hmm.
record so that site staff have access to it. But just thinking about a more shared access approach so folks aren't having to click into each record to abstract and store a ICF PDF.
That's a good question. I don't know if there's a way to automatically put that into a new folder. I would have to look into that and get back to you.
Great, thanks.
Thanks for the question there, Jacob. Thank you, Simi, for addressing those. Um, yeah, I just haven't used a lot of the file repository on the front end. I'm more at the back end, and I'm thinking that it is structured a certain way through the REDCap framework to have it in certain directories on the web server. But like Simi said, we will double check that, Jacob, and get back with you. Appreciate that question. Any others, Alex?
That appears to be it.
Okay, well, do want to thank everybody for listening and Jacob, thanks for the questions. Want to review some of the links that I've gone through. Do not expect you to have to do a screenshot or memorization or or the like. Um, Alex is going to put those in the chat. Simi will send that out in the emails after this meeting, along with the slides from this presentation. And also, we have the archived slides that also will be out there. But, if we got a link for the guest speaker, if you'd like to join us, hint, hint, wink, wink. We've got the classic user request is very active on that one. Technical support, if you have any REDCap questions or issues, go in here and select REDCap in the portal there, and it'll notify us. I got the tutorials from Vanderbilt in this document library. Again, we got the self-guided Canvas course at this link. And as I said, the previous LLC slides, these are the slides since coming over to ITS. It would not have the MED LLS, Lunch, Learn, and Share slides that we had previously. All right. I want to thank everybody for attending. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy days to join us. Our next meeting will be next Wednesday, April 29th, almost the last day of the month. It's always on a Wednesday. And again, it'll be at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We've got some few ideas on our topic, but we're leaving it open in case we get that 1, 2, or 15 people that want to present with us. Before we finalize that, we'll be notifying you in about a week or so what the new topic will be, who will be presenting it, and so keep an eye out in your mailbox for that kind of information. Thanks again, everybody. Hope you have a blessed afternoon and look forward to seeing you again on April 29th. Thank you.